She had never seen a sky that deep. Alara blinked as the atmosphere-scraping towers of Station Talos loomed over her, etched in chrome and silence. The shuttle hissed shut behind her. She adjusted her glasses with shaking fingers, heart hammering not from fear, but the overwhelming pressure of being the only junior xenolinguist on a research station orbiting a dead moon. Everyone here was bigger, sharper, cold. She was 5'4", lugging a patched datapad and a brain full of ancient languages no one cared about, until they discovered him. Korvac. No image had been made public. No footage released. Only vague warnings in red font on her intake packet. Apex predator species. Warborn. Isolate during interaction. Responds unpredictably. She was escorted by a board security drone to Wing Delta, where sealed bioglass panels lined the walls like enclosures at a museum. At the far end of the hall, behind 3 layers of transluminal shielding, stood the most still, most unnervingly calm being she had ever seen. Over 7 feet tall. Eyes like ice layered over obsidian. Motionless, until she approached. Her mouth was dry. Her datapad unsteady in her grip. She activated the auto-transcriber. Alara Miles, Linguistic Division. I've been assigned to catalog your speech patterns. He didn't move. Not even a blink. She cleared her throat. Your dialect contains variants of binary-rooted morphemes. Curious anomaly. Can we begin? A low growl echoed faintly through the barrier, not vocal, but something deeper. Subsonic. She flinched. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. You smell of starch. Books. Weakness. The translator buzzed, struggling to keep pace. His voice, raw and guttural, didn't need volume to feel heavy. I read you've been recorded using high-cadence phrasing inconsistent with base syntax, she replied. I'd like to understand why. That made him shift. One step closer. Light scattered across his dark hide, muscles moving under skin that looked almost metallic. You want to know why? His gaze flicked across her face, analytical. No other being has asked. They fear me. I'm not here to fear you. I'm here to translate you. A pause. Then a low laugh, cut short. You think knowing words makes you strong? No, she said evenly. But knowing how to use them makes us different. Another step. Now only one pane of translucent shielding separated them. He spoke again, but this time, not in the dominant tongue. Fractured syllables cascaded like breaking glass. The translator failed instantly. She furrowed her brow and repeated the last segment slowly, correcting its tonal register. His head tilted. You recognize that? Of course. It's derivative of pre-collapse Lexkai dialect. I studied it during my thesis. You were shifting mid-sentence. Like you wanted to hide. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. Was that amusement? You are not what I expected. She didn't respond. Instead, she tapped the glass with her stylus. Say that last phrase again. But slower. I want to see if the suffix modulation changes under observation. His eyes narrowed. You analyze me like a problem. I study what people overlook. Sometimes that includes monsters. Silence. I was made for war, he said finally. Refined. Modified. Every part of me optimized for violence. You weren't born? No. Created. I was the final prototype. My siblings fell in trials. Her fingers hovered above the datapad. And yet you speak in broken, ancient dialects only used in ceremonial storytelling. He said nothing. She leaned closer. Your language is a code. But you're hiding in it, not behind it. His chest rose slightly. And you, human? Why are you here? I wasn't supposed to be. But I applied 10 times. They stopped rejecting me once the field cleared from the last station breach. You wanted this? Not the danger, she said, eyes steady. The mystery. He stared, a predator seeing something unfamiliar and unsure whether to consume it or back away. You are strange, he muttered. You speak to me without trembling. I'm trembling, she said quietly. You just haven't noticed. He huffed, an exhale like a reverse growl. For the next hour, they exchanged fragmented dialogue. She mapped tonal patterns. He began slipping into hybrid syntax without resistance. He no longer stood like a statue, but like a man listening, challenging her with double meanings, misdirection, puns, and riddles buried in ancient phrasing. She didn't flinch. She kept pace. Replied in kind. Matched every hidden jab with a counterpoint. By the end of the session, when she finally stood and deactivated her pad, he asked, "What is your purpose, really?" She hesitated, then answered, "To understand what even monsters are afraid of." He didn't smile. But something in his posture shifted, less taut, more curious. As she turned to leave, his voice followed her down the corridor. "Return, Elara. Next time, we speak of memory." The next time she entered the corridor, he was already speaking. Not to her, just into the air, fragments of a poem in a language no longer spoken. She didn't interrupt. She waited until he paused, then recited the next line from memory. His gaze snapped to hers. "You've read our rights?" "Translated them," she corrected. "Twice. The syntax in your war chants shares a root pattern with mourning hymns from pre-expansion Hrax." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "We were never taught the second half. You weren't meant to grieve," she said. "Only to win." Something passed through his eyes, brief and unreadable. He folded his arms. "You treat my language like puzzle pieces." "It is a puzzle," she said. "But one someone built to hide something else." He grunted, and this time, she caught the sliver of amusement in the sound. "You believe words can reveal truth? I believe the way you choose them shows what you're not saying." For days, their sessions expanded. He stopped testing her with threats. Instead, he challenged her with logic games, verbal traps, and cultural idioms meant to confuse outsiders. She untangled them, always returning with cross-reference phrases, building a mental bridge between meanings he didn't realize still mattered. One afternoon, she asked him why his people spoke so many contradictory idioms about death. He answered, "We were trained to expect it, deny it, and cause it. But not to understand it. Then why preserve the rituals at all? To remember what came before the breeding vats." That was the first time he admitted his ancestors hadn't always been war machines. She noticed subtle changes. His tone softened, not weak, but measured. His phrasing became less cryptic. The translator struggled less. He began asking her questions, about Earth's languages, about humor, about why humans cry during music. She explained grief in notes, laughter in contrast. He listened. Once, she said, "Humans laugh when something breaks a pattern. You do the unexpected. We find that delightful. And what do you call it when something breaks you?" She didn't answer. But the question lingered. During one exchange, she brought up an old Terran philosophical concept: compassion as strategic strength. He scoffed at first, then demanded sources. She sent him 3 Earth texts, which he quoted the next day without attribution. She smiled. "You're stealing my arguments. I'm testing them in my voice." The line between conversation and research blurred. He asked about her past, how a human with no military rank ended up here. She told him about growing up unnoticed, how her ideas were always 3 steps outside what institutions wanted. He listened without interrupting. Then said, "You were shaped without being forged." She replied, "You were forged without being asked." That day, he said her name unprompted. Not human. Not linguist. Just Elara. A week in, she noticed that he no longer postured between sentences. He didn't need to. He had started choosing clarity over intimidation. But the station crew was noticing too. Her logs were flagged twice for emotional bias. She was warned once, subtly, during a routine security sweep. She told no one, but he saw her hesitation the next day. "Your people fear what's changing. They fear what they don't control," she said. "They were right to fear me once. Maybe. But what they fear now is that I might be right about you. That made him still for a long time. The breakthrough came during a discussion about ancient dual narrative structures, myths with two meanings layered in conflict. She pointed out how his people's creation stories were all missing the middle section. You've erased context, she said. Left only glory and pain. Because context breeds doubt, he replied. And doubt is poison in battle. But context is life in dialogue. For the first time, he didn't answer. Later that day, he said, You humans are fragile. You bleed easily. You cry over dying stars and orphan data. Yet you endure. That's our strength. No. That's your weapon. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. He was beginning to understand. He started bringing questions to their sessions, unprovoked, unscripted. Why do you still bury your dead in soil? Why do you name storms? Why do you sing even when alone? Each answer seemed to rattle something ancient inside him, some dormant part untouched by programming or training. One night she sent him a Terran audio file. A violin piece. No lyrics. Just sorrow made sound. He didn't speak the next day. He just said, Play it again. She did. And when the music ended, he looked at her, not as an anomaly, not as a variable, but as something singular. Not prey. Not subject. Human. The emergency struck during a routine diagnostic sweep. A quantum relay shorted in the station's core, triggering a cascading data loss across linguistic archives. Every advanced AI translation node failed within minutes. No one understood the cause. No one could fix it fast enough. Except her. Elara had once joked that humanity kept backups on drives older than the stars they explored. Now, digging through analog files while others panicked, she found one, an archaic waveform modulation buried in an obsolete radio format. She decoded the raw signals by hand, cross-referenced centuries-old human engineering, and manually rerouted the comm grid through a hybrid acoustic channel. Her override stabilized the field. Communication across the station resumed. Lives were preserved. All because one human, dismissed as fragile and eccentric, knew how to think sideways. When the system was restored, he spoke first. You were silent for hours. I was busy, she said, brushing off the adrenaline that hadn't yet faded. You rerouted the station through sound? I read once that early Earth engineers called it listening to the wires. Korvac processed that. Your people solve crises by digging through ghosts. No. We solve them by refusing to let noise be meaningless. That night, she slept in the data center, slumped against a rusted server. When she awoke, a security drone hovered nearby. It carried no weapons, only a message from him. Teach me how humans learn. She accepted. What began as interviews turned into lessons. She introduced him to abstraction, metaphor, irony, absurdity. Concepts incompatible with his original design. He absorbed them slowly, like a muscle-learning motion it was never meant to perform. She showed him paradoxes, statements that could not be resolved. He wrestled with them, not as logic traps, but as truths humans had learned to live with. You accept contradiction, he said. We have to. Every breath is a contradiction. Carbon and hope in the same lungs. Your weakness is willful. Our weakness is the price of imagination. He asked about childhood. She described it: confusion, wonder, fear, dreams. His species had no concept of childhood. No learning curve. Only immediate expectation. His first memory was of being tested. Then you were never given time to fail, she said. Failure meant deletion. Then you were never allowed to change. That struck something. He stood motionless for long minutes before finally speaking again. Your species glorifies chaos. You dance inside it. We build from it, she said. He asked to hear her speak Earth languages. She demonstrated tonal shifts, poetic rhythm, nonsense rhymes. He was most fascinated by humor. She explained that sometimes, laughter came from surprise, not threat, but absurdity. He tested it. What do you call a species that thinks pain is temporary and bureaucracy eternal? Human, he grunted. I think I made a joke. You did. And she laughed, not at him, but because for the first time, he had reached across a void. Their sessions grew faster. More fluid. He stopped speaking in fragments. He quoted Terran philosophers. He asked about dreams. She told him dreams weren't just visions, they were language unbound by structure. He tried to describe one, haltingly, admitting that it felt like he was watching himself through her eyes. It disturbed me. That's what reflection does, she said. It shows us who we're becoming. When she brought up stories, Earth's myths, tales of beasts and heroes, he dismissed them at first. But one resonated, the tale of the Minotaur, a creature built for destruction, trapped in a labyrinth until someone chose to see the man within the monster. You think I'm a metaphor, he said. No. I think you were forced into one. I'm trying to write you out. He didn't speak after that. Not right away. But the next day, he brought a story of his own. Not one he was taught, but one he remembered, faint and incomplete. A tale whispered among soldiers during transport cycles, about a warrior who refused orders once. No one knew what happened to him. Just that his silence echoed longer than any command. She wrote it down. Archived it. When she looked up, his voice was softer. Why do you keep my words? Because stories survive longer than commands. He nodded slowly. That same evening, he asked her what she feared most. She said, being misunderstood. He said nothing. But the next session, his syntax changed again, no longer defensive, no longer encoded. Just clear. Direct. For the first time, she didn't have to translate him. He made himself understandable. Not for the station. Not for a report. But for her. 2 weeks later, the directive arrived without ceremony. Command classified Korvac as an unstable variable. He was to be relocated to a black site for indefinite containment. No appeal. No warning. They hadn't seen growth, they saw risk. Alara saw betrayal. She confronted the head of the research division. You asked me to decipher him? Not discard him. The official response was sterile. He was never meant for integration. Alara's sessions were a tool to extract useful linguistic and psychological data. The experiment was deemed complete. She returned to his chamber, heart pounding, pulse erratic. He saw it in her eyes before she said anything. They're moving you, she said flatly. Soon. He didn't react. He only asked, how long did you fight it before telling me? Since I read the directive. 32 hours. Why tell me now? Because I don't lie. Not to you. His voice dropped, quieter than she'd ever heard. They fear what I've become. No. They fear what you've learned. And worse, they fear that I understand you. Silence stretched. Then, will you stop them? I don't have that kind of power. Then what do we have? She met his gaze. Clarity. They can erase records, but they can't unlearn what we've shared. He studied her like he was committing every feature to memory. Then I want you to write it. I already have. Not the data. Not the syntax trees. The story. Her throat tightened. They'll burn it. Not if you tell it out loud. That night, she activated a dormant emergency broadcast node, meant for system-wide distress calls. She didn't send coordinates. She didn't transmit warnings. She told a story. A story of a creature engineered for violence, who learned language not as a weapon, but as a bridge. Who discovered metaphor, contradiction, music. Who began to choose his words, not follow them. And a human, not a soldier, not a hero, who saw through the armor and refused to flinch. The message looped across minor trade routes and forgotten satellites. Within hours, it reached listeners outside protocol. Fringe settlements. Rogue AI enclaves. Retired translators. People who still believed in context before compliance. Station Command acted quickly. They locked her out of linguistic systems. Revoked access to restricted comms. Cancelled her security credentials. But it was too late. He had heard the broadcast. And more importantly, others had too. His response wasn't verbal. It was action. He initiated a mental language shift unlike any she'd seen. A resonance layer, buried beneath audible tone, that triggered subsonic emotional data. An unspoken signal, felt rather than heard. The station's machines didn't understand it. But organic personnel did. They paused. Froze mid-command. Several broke down crying. Others simply turned and walked away. He was speaking in emotion now, not words. Grief laced with memory. Rage tempered by restraint. Hope buried in restraint. He wasn't manipulating. He was expressing. And no one knew how to shut it down. Ilara used the chaos to re-enter the secure sector. She bypassed failsafes with command lines no one thought she'd memorized. When she reached his containment cell, the barriers were still active, but only technically. The AI gatekeeper refused to engage lockdown protocols. It had parsed his signal and labeled it non-hostile. She approached the barrier. "They'll come soon." He didn't ask where they'd go. He asked what she needed. "Proof," she said, "that you aren't the weapon they made you to be." He placed the palm against the glass. "Not with force, just connection." She mirrored it. "I won't survive outside their systems," he said. "But you might. I'm not leaving you behind. Then take what I've become and make it impossible to silence." She stared at him for what felt like hours and seconds. Then she copied every one of his custom language patterns onto a secure drive, encrypted not with military codes, but with idioms, jokes, fragments of poetry. Only someone who understood him could ever access it. As alarms blared, she slipped the drive into a hidden neural jack behind her ear. Then she stepped back, locked eyes with him, and said one final word. "Remember." He nodded once. Then he turned, knelt in the center of the room, and waited. When security arrived, they found him calm. Unmoving. But Ilara was gone. They never found her. Station records showed her disappearance as an internal breach with no traceable exit path. The official narrative stated that she had been compromised by prolonged exposure to the subject. Psychological degradation, they said. Cognitive empathy override. She was branded a defector. Case closed. But the story didn't end there. Whispers traveled faster than broadcasts. Unofficial channels lit up with fragments of her message. Traders recited it between starports. Isolated researchers decrypted poetic bursts hidden in ordinary signals. She had turned his voice into a living code. Not a language meant to conquer, but to awaken. Some began calling it the Echo script. It didn't obey linguistic structure. It carried tone, tension, memory. Emotional resonance encoded in syntactic anomalies. Not readable by machines. Only felt. The first to decode it was a linguist on Epsilon Thorn. Then a disillusioned diplomat on Kelter Prime. Then, unexpectedly, a war veteran who hadn't spoken in 9 years. Each claimed the same thing. The language didn't say anything at first. It listened to them. And once it had listened long enough, it responded. Not in commands. In understanding. Reports followed. Isolated war beasts, long dormant remnants of Korvac's kind, began to show behavior outside their programming. Hesitation. Empathy. Recognition. Some defected from their units. Others simply stopped obeying. The High Command blamed a communications virus. A mimetic weapon. But containment failed. The signal wasn't centralized. It had become part of local tongues, embedded in lullabies, graffiti, old Earth folk songs distorted into harmony with the new phonemes. It was Ilara's doing, but no one had seen her. Not in person. Until someone did. On a minor moon in a system with no strategic value, a field medic heard a melody while repairing an old beacon. The song was human, but the tone was alien, deep, resonant, like grief tempered by logic. The medic followed it to a cave where a woman sat beside an emitter made of scavenged parts. She didn't run. She offered him tea. He asked her name. She only said, "I used to be someone who translated death. Now I rewrite it." She stayed hidden. But she trained others, quietly, selectively. People who weren't warriors. Poets. Technicians. Refugees. Anyone who understood that language wasn't just a tool, but a mirror. They called themselves carriers. Not rebels. Not prophets. Just those who remembered that empathy, once learned, could be shared. Meanwhile, Korvac remained in containment. He never resisted. Never raised his voice. But guards noticed something shift. The other prisoners, those bred for slaughter, stopped speaking in commands. They started asking questions. Primitive ones at first. Then sharper. More layered. As if they were dreaming. He never claimed credit. He only spoke when spoken to. And what he said was never aggressive. Always precise. Measured. As if every word weighed more than steel. One guard once asked him why he remained passive. He answered, "Because a storm doesn't need to move to reshape the land." The message Alara had encrypted was eventually broken, not by military AI, but by a child on a border colony who taught herself to whistle in binary rhythm. She hadn't known what it was. She just liked the way it felt. Her version spread faster than any fleet. Kids copied it. Adults learned it to feel close to the young. Entire communities began communicating in fragmented versions. A new kind of shared fluency. One not designed for efficiency, but for emotional clarity. And still, Alara remained a ghost. But everywhere she'd been, the signs lingered. A turn of phrase here. A shift in tone there. Language as infection, but one that healed. Decades passed. Korvac was eventually transferred, quietly, without fanfare, to a remote outpost no longer on any map. Surveillance ceased. No logs were kept. Some believed he died. Others knew better. Then one day, a single line appeared in the oldest universal translation matrix, untouched since before the war. A phrase in an unknown tongue, composed of both human and alien roots. Roughly translated, it meant, "We are not what we were made to be." No one claimed authorship. But across sectors, people recognized the cadence. It wasn't a slogan. It was a reminder. That a human had once spoken with a weapon until it chose silence over violence. That she hadn't converted him. She had understood him. And in that understanding, rewrote not his code, but his purpose.